Let me bring David Campbell Bannerman in, who's a Conservative MEP, former UKIP Deputy Leader and Party Chairman. Good morning to you, David.
Morning, Jonathan.
Good morning. So Sandy's suggesting that the £44 billion, it's only the very start of it. It's going to have a huge cost to this country, Brexit, and he doesn't feel it's worth it. Do you disagree?
Well, yes, I do. I mean, it's not Brexit that's costing this. This is the cost of the EU, and Sandy wanted to keep us in, the Lib Dems wanted to keep us in, and we'd be paying even more. I mean, we're paying $12 billion net a year, and it would be going up to about $16-17 billion if we'd stayed in, because they want an army and they want a pension system, social security. They want to create a state, and we'd be paying for Albania and Serbia and anyone else that wants to join the EU as well on top of this. And this is just a reflection of our commitments as a member of the EU. Thank goodness we're leaving.
That $12 billion you just referred to doesn't include the money that we get back from the EU, though, that is spent in this country. I mean, for example, in 2016...
That's net, Jonathan.
No.
It's 19 gross.
It was
gross.
£12 billion net in 2016, and then we received an additional £5 billion that was spent in this country on things like our public sector.
No, well, you're confusing net and gross. The $12 billion is net.
Yes.
The actual gross figure is 19. We received back about $7 billion, which goes to farmers.
Well, we get our rebate. We get our rebate to start with. So when you take that down, that brings us down to $12 billion, and then there was an additional. I'm referring just to 2016. There was an additional $5 billion that was spent in this country on things like the public sector.
We pay $19 billion in. We get $7 back, which leaves $12 billion.
Well, you're going to have.
That includes what you're saying. The $7 billion includes what you said.
Okay.
No, $12 billion net is the real figure, and also, it doesn't include £3 billion of fish, which we'll be getting back. It doesn't include development aid. Actually goes around the side of this. It's not included. We pay about $1 to $2 billion to the EU separately.
We spent, and I have the figures in front of me, 2016, I don't wish to be pedantic about this, but the figures are very important considering we're talking about money here. 2016, the UK's EU membership fee was £17 billion. We then received the rebate of $4 billion, so it was $13 billion that we actually paid as a membership fee. Then we got an additional $5 billion back that was spent on the public sector in this country. So it's less than the $12 billion you referred to.
Is that ONS?
No, it's Her Majesty's Treasury.
Yes, you see, the Treasury doesn't include a lot of figures. That's a problem with the Treasury.
So the government's own figures on how much we spent on EU membership in 2016 is wrong?
Yeah, well, no, it's done in a different way. I mean, the Treasury, it's very complex, but it's safer to go 12 billion net, 19 billion gross. That's ONS, Office of National Statistics. If you go to that, that's the figure. So, no, I mean, we do get money back, but that is, it's controlled by the EU. I mean, farming is 100% controlled by the EU, the farming subsidies, the way it's done. We'll be running our own farming, quite rightly too. And we will pay a fee probably for Horizon 2020 for research grants. But we get almost all the same money we pay in, we get back. So that's not going to make much difference. But the point is, the $44 billion has been spoken about. And by the way, it's not confirmed. It's all subject to negotiation. But this is commitments we've already made to the EU. It's a very, very expensive form of membership, isn't it?
But we, of course, don't know how much we're going to have to pay to have access to the single market.
No, you don't pay for access to the single market. We have a bigger market.
So you don't believe there'll be any further cost on top of the $44 billion?
Well, no, we'll be paying for Horizon.
Because we were told there wouldn't be any cost to us regardless. We were told there would be no cost to us. We were told that we could walk away without owing anything, and we were told it wouldn't cost us anything.
Sorry, look, Norway doesn't pay for access to the single market. I got that from the Norwegian ambassador direct. It's on film. The point is we don't pay for access because we import more into the UK than we export to the EU.
But forgive me, David, we've had this argument all the way since the... David, we've had this argument all the way since the referendum, that we buy more cars from them, we buy champagne...
Jonathan, please, I'm trying to make the point. Because we import more than we export, If we're talking about access to a single market, our single market, we'd be actually charging EU far more for access to the British market because we happen to be the second largest importer of goods and services in the world after the United States. The EU should be paying us, but this is money for liabilities, for Eastern Europe, for roads and railways and all of that stuff. That is a commitment because we've been a member of the EU.
But David, forgive me, David Davis has already suggested that there will be certain things after we have negotiated the divorce. There are certain things that we will be prepared to pay money for. So this £44 billion is not the end of it, is it? There will be an annual fee that we will pay.
Yeah, not very much. We're talking about 12 billion net, as we keep saying, but I don't know what we'll be paying. Maybe 2-3 billion, but that will be for specific things. Horizon 2020 research program, which is a good thing. Norway is part of that. Canada is part of that. Israel's part of that.
But David, please, can we just pin this down? Because the British public, my listeners were told in the lead up to the referendum, they were told that we would be able to walk away from the EU without paying a penny. We were in fact told that we would get £350 million a week. We were told we would get £350 million a week that would go into the NHS. We were told that the French and the Germans would be so desperate to trade with us that they would simply fall over themselves to do a trade deal. Now, by your own admission, there is going to be at least a £44 billion divorce bill. There's going to be several billion a year we will have to pay for various different fees.
Done that. And you are going on, Jonathan. Sorry. We did not say a lot of that. The fact is it's 373 million a week, by the way, which is the gross figure. And some of that money comes back. Fair enough. We will be spending more on the NHS. That's good. That's good. But
where will that money come from,
I think you're confusing. Well, you are saving 12 billion less any fees for agencies and programs. I accept there's certain things and liabilities or pensions. We haven't actually discussed what we're going to do. We have commissioners like Lord Mandelson, Lord Kinnock, Stephen, the previous Kinnock, actually, the Labour leader. He's on an EU pension. I'll be on an EU pension. MEPs will be as well. There is a liability for that, but it is tiny compared to our net contribution every year, which, as I say, would be going up to about 16 billion.
But if we just look, if we look at what us, the British public, were told in the run-up to the referendum, people were told it wouldn't cost us anything, and in fact, we would be financially much better off.
No,
Here we are. Yes, we were.
Where's your source for that, John?
It was written on the side of a blooming bus, for goodness sake.
Oh, for heaven's sake. It didn't say. It said we send 350 million to
We could spend that on the NHS instead.
Yes, we could. We could.
Right, but let's just look at let's look at where we are today. So we're looking at an amount that we have to pay of at least £44 billion just to walk away.
Well, we don't know
then
that.
we have the £3 billion. Then we have the £3 billion that the Chancellor announced in the budget last week.
Part of the 44.
The £3 billion. No, but that was to prepare for no deal.
The Times is reporting that the money could be paid over a number of years, and that's probably what the Treasury is in there.
The £3 billion,
the 3.5 billion figure.
David, the £3 billion, yes. The £3 billion last week was ring fenced by the Chancellor to prepare for no deal. So let's add the £3 billion to the £44 billion, plus the 3 or 4 billion a year for the membership fees that you anticipate. Then let's talk. Then let's.
Jonathan.
Then
if we don't get a deal, we don't have to pay any of this money.
Okay. Then let's talk about the potential effect, as Sandy Walkington has said, to the economy of us no longer having the access to the EU that we have at the moment. And if you look at the IMF, if you look at the OECD, if you look at their predictions
the Bank of England?
For the future growth of this country, then the future growth is vastly reduced compared to what it would have been previously. So how can you suggest that financially this is all worth it?
Well, I'm sorry, it's Project Fear again. Bank of England yesterday, their stress test.
You can't just say Project Fear because I'm presenting you with facts.
You are quoting Project Fear, Jonathan. You're not being even-handed. I'm sorry. The Bank of England yesterday announced its bank stress tests. Okay. Now, it basically said if there was no deal with the EU, our banks would be fine. Okay. Now that, Project Fear actually said that wouldn't be the case.
You can't keep saying Project Fear when somebody presents the facts are there for people to see today.
They said we'd lose 500,000 jobs, right? By now, after Brexit. What's happened? We have the lowest unemployment since 1975.
I'm not talking about unemployment. I'm talking about finance. I'm talking about finance, and you cannot get away with the facts that we are looking at a £44 billion bill. We're looking at £3 billion that the Chancellor announced in the budget last week that was going to be for a no-deal scenario.
What do your figures say we're saving every year? You've just mentioned... What do your figures say? Sorry, I don't hear you, John.
You've just said £3 or £4 billion... You've just said £3 or £4 billion that you can see us paying annually for membership. So surely this idea... No. You said that you can see going forward £3 or £4 billion that we would pay into the EU for various different things.
We don't know.
So this is
we haven't completed the negotiation.
This is not a Brexit where we're going to have £350 million a week on the NHS.
The negotiation, Jonathan. Honestly, you're making up as you're going along. We haven't completed the negotiation, have we? We don't know what that figure will be, but about 2 to 3 billion possibly. It depends which programs we stay in. Do you want to stay in the European Space Agency, Jonathan? What's the figure on that?
I have absolutely no idea.
Work this out. Do you want to stay in the European Space Agency?
You tell us. Is this something else you think we're going to have to pay for? Well, because what I'm telling you is many of my listeners will feel very, very, very annoyed because they will feel that they voted for something that we were told was going to be a massive income boost for this country. And in fact, it looks like it's going to cost us a fortune.
Sorry, Jonathan. These are commitments we made, but thanks to people like the Lib Dems from Sandy and co, we've been trapped in the EU. We have these huge commitments which come from being a member of the EU, which we will not have to pay once we leave. So, there'll be a huge saving. And yes, okay, we'll pay for some programs and agencies and some liabilities because we honour our commitments as we're legally good.
So how long until we have all this extra money when we've paid off all these bills? How long until we have the £350 million a week to spend on the NHS? How many years?
Well, it depends when we leave, doesn't it? I mean, you see, I think we are paying in
Depends
part.
If we leave.
No one knows what we're getting. I mean, I say, what are we getting for this? I mean, the transition period, remember, is about 2 years. So, if you're
so you're now predicting we might not even leave at all?
No, we will leave. Of course we'll leave. That's what your listeners wanted, Jonathan. It's very strong in our area.
But many of my listeners wanted it based on what they were told in the run-up to the referendum. And every time anybody presented them, anytime anyone presented them with the alternatives, as indeed I've been doing this morning in this conversation with you, they were shouted down and told it was Project Fear and they should ignore it.
No, I'm sorry. You're twisting it, and I do think that's very unfair. It is not the case. You're confusing the ongoing liabilities of being a member of the EU with the ongoing cost. The ongoing cost is very small. And I tell you, if it's, 2 billion we pay every year or whatever it is, we're saving 10 billion net every single year, which is an awful lot of money for roads and hospitals and schools. And you're not actually allowing for that. This is ongoing liabilities from being a member of the EU. I don't like paying the EU all this money. My God, if we'd stayed in, that bill would be going through the roof. And, Germany's pretty upset with us at the moment because they'll be carrying the bill, or they'll have to have less parliaments. We have 2 parliaments, the EU. Why do we need 2 parliaments, Strasbourg and Brussels? Why do we need a film prize? Why do we need all this wasteful spending right, left and centre? Why does the EU need an army? It is now committed to have a permanent structured headquarters of an army. It's going to undermine NATO.
Right, so Sandy Walkington, Sandy, we are, whichever way you slice the cake, we are going to end up much better off in the future because we will no longer be members of the EU. And that's why it is worth this period of financial pain, and we have to get through that and accept it and swallow it, because the future looks much, much brighter.
Well, I don't know. If I was working for EADS in Stevenage, the satellite manufacturer, and there, Mr. Campbell Bannerman just aerially talks about the European Space Agency, but that's really important.
It's not related.
We are
got it wrong. It's not related.
If if I was actually a Vauxhall worker in Luton and depending on a supply chain that goes back and forth across European boundaries in order to build my vans and then export them, I just listen. I debated during the referendum campaign. I debated with Peter Lilly on 5 consecutive nights. And I said that David Cameron would have to resign if the referendum was lost. No, he won't, said Peter Lilly. I said that there would be a massive problem with the Irish border. And Peter Lilly said, oh, no, there's no problem there. That's going to be easy. We can manage that. All the way through, they just made things up. And we can just look now and actually see the reality. And the reality is that this is the biggest act of self-harm that any country has done in modern times. And even if you can point to a sunlit upland of 50 or 100 years' time, that's no good for us and our families and our children who are going to face a real shock to their living standards, the real prospect of actually losing jobs, of seeing firms close. We're already seeing that agencies are being moved back to Europe, which were set up in the UK. This is just a total disaster which is coming down the train towards us. And what we need is to have a second referendum on the terms of any deal, and people have the right.
But Sandy, there is no appetite for that. Sandy, there is no appetite for that. The only appetite that I ever hear from anyone about a second referendum comes from the Liberal Democrats.
Well, I'm not so sure that's true, actually. If you listen to business leaders, they want it. You listen to the CBI or the IOD, they are saying it. And I think you'll find that there are elements in certainly Dominic Grieve and the Conservative Party wants to see that, Ken Clarke. You see Chuka Umunna, whom you quoted early on in this programme, on the Labour side. And I think as people start to understand the enormity of the lies that they were told, they're going to say, hang on, we actually need to have a second chance.
What about the high unemployment, Sandy? They said 500,000 jobs. What about 30 billion budget, emergency budget that Osborne warned we'd have to have? What about the 4,200 that the household budget would go up? The cost of Brexit. None of that has happened. You were lying through your teeth, the Remain side. We get pointed out the 350 million. Well, actually, Laura Koonsberg of the BBC actually said recently it's a valid figure because it's based on Office of National Statistics. This is
it was only a valid figure.
You are talking any money down. You were talking the economy down. These agencies have to move because they are part, we will not be part of the EU and they oversee the EU. But 75% of the people want to stay in Britain. So like Britain. And there are opportunities we'll have our own regulators in the UK and already the jobs are being created for our own regulators.
Yeah, and what's that going to cost? And then it was the Chancellor talking the economy down last week in the budget when he actually had to stand up and say, and these are official figures by the UK government, that our growth prospects going forward, and it's growth that pays for everything. It pays for the health service.
Yeah, well, I don't think, the Eurozone has been a disaster. The Eurozone has destroyed one third of the entire Greece economy, and you're in favour of that. It's destroyed the Italian economy, and as you say, it's worse than us at the moment. But the point is, the Eurozone is picking up because they've printed 2 trillion euros of money to try and help pick up the Eurozone. That's an economic disaster, and it could still collapse.
Well, it's called quantitative easing.
This is the EU, has done that, and the US Treasury has done that. The thing is, Sandy, do you want to be in a super state? Do you want to be in a super state? That's the question. The issue of the referendum was super state or sovereignty. And don't deny it. Because
but it doesn't work like
Juncker,
that, David.
No, let me finish.
There is only one
President Juncker
sovereign...
and Macron have both called for an EU army. They both call for 33% corporate taxation. What will that do to our economy? 33%. You're in favour of that?
We would have a veto
and we want to run our pensions and social security. Do you want to be in a super state? Do you want a European super state, Sandy? That's what you stand for, isn't it, Lib Dems?
David, as a member of the EU, we would have a veto. You talked earlier about Albania joining.
Come off it. A lot of vetoes have been abolished, and that's what goes on. And I'm afraid we're halfway towards a super state.
Okay, listen, sadly we are out of time.